All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I kind of want to dive right into things. Well, actually, I probably shouldn't. Trey, we'll be right back with you, okay? Give me just a second. I usually start like this. Hey, everybody, welcome. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining the channel. There are a bunch of new people, and I'm really, really excited. I'm seeing messages and Patreon, and it's just awesome. I've been working really hard on that intro and just trying to learn the software, and I'm really, really excited that we got it up. So this person that I have today is someone who I wanted to talk to last year badly. We sat, we talked about it, we scheduled it out, and then I completely lost the conversation. And Trey's been kind enough to pick up and hop in today. So now, without further ado, Trey Jadlow, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, Eric. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So tell me about yourself. Who are you?
Well, my name is Trey Jadlow, of course, and I live in the Kansas City area. I'm a dental lab technician. I make crowns and bridges for doctors. I'm a teeth maker.
Okay.
Been doing that most of my life. Worked for my dad, and then for much of my career, and then I opened up my own lab about 10 years ago. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm of the Reformed Baptist persuasion. I've been a Christian about 33 years. I became a born-again Christian when I was about 20 years old in an organization called YWAM. Are you familiar with that? You ever heard of them?
I do, actually. That's been a long time.
Youth with a Mission. It's a youth missions organization. Anyway, I became a Christian there, so I was in the charismatic movement for a while, and I've since left that. And like I said, I'm a confessional Reformed Baptist. Sadly, I'm divorced, but I've got 6 children, ages 28 down to 16, 3 boys and 3 girls. I'm mostly an autodidact. I don't have a lot of formal education, but I am fascinated with the concepts and the disciplines of epistemology and metaphysics and philosophy as a whole. I'm not all that well versed, but if I find something interesting, I will latch onto it and dig into it. And so there's certain things that are ultimate. The issues of ultimacy fascinate me, and so I've kind of given myself to those disciplines, and I very much enjoy having conversations. I'm a conversationalist, and so I appreciate this format, and I appreciate you being so kind to give me a platform.
Absolutely, man. So I am eventually going to have heated discussions, debates, formal things on this channel. But one of the things that I really want to push for is showing mutual respect, being able to say, hey, you can respect the person and not necessarily respect the idea. And those ideas are what's on the table, and that's what we're going to be discussing. So cheers to that, man. You were very enthusiastic, and I just want to publicly apologize for having completely lost our conversation and you just waiting patiently for over a month. Dude, thank you.
You know what? I actually had forgotten about it, and then somebody else came on. I think I was talking with someone. I was talking to Eli. I think you did a hangout or a conversation with him recently. And I don't know why I was looking for something else for something. And then I saw your name there, and I just saw it a few days ago too, and I'd forgotten about it. And I was like, and then you contacted me the next day, and I thought, oh, that's unfortunate. And so I'm very glad that we can get together now and talk.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the really, really big, the nitty gritty, I just want to let people know that if you're watching right now, there is going to be a patron only live stream after this at 7 p.m. Central. So if you are a patron, please hop onto Patreon so that you can grab that link and join us afterward.
Eric, I forgot to tell you something. I apologize. I'm only able to stay till 6:15. I forgot to tell you that before we started that. I beg your pardon.
6:15 Central Time?
Yes. So we're on the same time schedule.
Dude. Absolutely. I want to remove the shirt and actually get comfy and all of that before the live stream.
Okay.
So that's all right. But then let's dig in. I know that you were really excited about presenting arguments for the existence of God. And so I wanted to ask you, hit me. What did you want to talk about today?
Okay. Well, before we get, is it possible for me to just get a little bit of background maybe about you? Could you give me a very brief bio so I could get an idea of who you are? Because I'm really not that familiar with you.
Sure, no problem. I was raised a born-again Christian, Calvary Chapel.
Okay.
I had the standard Christian upbringing. Let's see, things didn't really start changing for me until I was a teen. I found my way out in my early 20s. By my late 20s, I had decided that, you know what, I want to get involved in activism, but I didn't know how. When I hit about 29, I moved to Austin and got involved with the atheist community of Austin, where the Atheist Experience is filmed. About a year after that, I started the younger sister show of the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen. And essentially the reason we did it is, have you seen the Atheist Experience?
Yes, I've seen. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I've got an invitation to Matt Dillon, but he's not interested yet. I'd love to have a conversation with him.
Sure. So the way that show goes, it's been going on for so long that if somebody calls in and says, "Hey, I want to talk about the Kalam cosmological argument," Matt, hops in and, I disagree with premise 2. Next, click. And if you're just joining the conversation, if you're just starting out, what the heck did that mean? What are the premises? Why do you reject? And for people who've been doing this for 20 years, it has to be repetitive and boring, but you know what? I haven't been doing this for 20 years. And so long as I don't go nuts, I absolutely am happy to go back over concepts and give people a place to start and hopefully lead by example with a little more understanding, compassion, and especially charitable listening. People aren't charitable very often anymore. And I think that we need to really get back to that. Even if you think that somebody's being a jerk, ask them, hey, did you really mean this? Give them the opportunity to live up to that better person. Because I find that we have those better conversations that way. So let's see.
So how would you?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Would you consider yourself then a hard atheist, a soft atheist, agnostic? I mean, sure. I know the word's really fluid, but give me an idea where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've read The God Delusion, I'm I think if it's 7 points on the scale, then I'm a 6. I think the statement, there are no gods, and making that solid statement is silly. Because the God claim entirely is dependent on the definition. And you could define your God as this cup of water. And I'd say, well, that's a silly definition, but I all of a sudden have to accept, okay, that cup of water exists. So as far as claims of answered prayers, the instantiation of the universe, the God of the Bible that I read, and that I read much more as an atheist after I wound up leaving, that God, the one that there are actual claims about that you can look into, does not exist. Okay. As far as being as an anti-theist is concerned, here's what I've found. I found that as people, we're not always great. And we look for excuses to not be great to each other. And I found a lot of people use their religion to be a place to couch bigotry. It definitely happened in my church. And I'm sure you've seen it in other churches. You have the Westboro Baptist Church, standing outside of the graves of fallen soldiers saying, thank God for dead soldiers, right? They're couching their bigotry in that religiosity. And I think that as far as being an anti-theist is concerned, I want to live in a world where we have less places to couch our bigotry. And if we hold each other accountable and responsible, then we can move forward. But that doesn't mean we've gotten rid of it. It just means we've given it one less place to hide. As far as philosophy is concerned, I'm a skeptic mostly. It just depends on the argument and where we're at. But generally, I find the most fun in talking to people about what they believe, asking them about it, and trying to flesh that out and see what we can agree on and what we don't agree on.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's great. All right, well, let me tell you a little bit about my apologetic methodology.
Sure.
I'm not friends with Eli, the guy you had on a few days ago, but I am acquaintances with him, and I really appreciate him. He's a great guy. But I'm starkly different from him. There's generally three schools of apologetics that are extant, that are generally the most popular ones, and it's going to be presuppositionalism, evidentialism, I'm blanking out here, and classicism. And presuppositionalism is going to be the type of perspective that's seeking for certainty, and they're going to be more on the rational side of things in the way that they deal with things. And they're, as you well know, they use the tag argument and employ it and try to use
So just to be clear, I don't think the tag argument meets the definition of rational. But I understand what you're saying, that they employ, a certain methodology.
Sure, and let me just continue on, maybe make sense to you. I'm not saying that. Well, let me put it in contrast to evidentialism. Evidentialism is an empirical method of proving or demonstrating God's existence, and strictly speaking, a presuppositionalism is not really demonstrating; they're just I don't know.
They're saying ollie oxen free.
They're front loading the argument so it can never lose. But the problem is it relies on informal fallacy in order to make the argument, the petitio principii fallacy, and therefore it impresses no one except their audience that is rooting for them.
But I definitely see value in talking to them. If you saw any of the last episode that I put out, I really enjoyed talking to them. Number one, because it wasn't a yelling fight, but number two, it led to people getting the opportunity to see tag and to see it laid out and to see, okay, well, here's what it looks like, and maybe be able to challenge their different views on it. Without feeling threatened, because they can see this conversation and know that, oh my gosh, I don't have the backfire effect. I'm not a part of this and needing to defend myself. But go on, tell me about yourself.
Well, let me say this so that's why I like Eli so much. I don't get along with presuppositionalism as for engagement, because they can't be questioned. But Eli is not like that. He's very gracious and kind, and he understands the presuppositional argument better than most presuppositionalists. So he's a very thoughtful guy, and I really like him. All right, so let me move on then to the evidential argument. And evidentialism is built upon empiricism, and so what it's going to do, it's going to be trying to make its case probabilistically, okay? And they usually use a cumulative case, and they're going to focus on the resurrection, generally speaking. And so what they do is they've got all these ideas, the teleological argument and the cosmological argument, whatever. They're gonna use them in such a way that you can say, given all this information that I have all these arguments together. It's more probable that God exists than not exists. And so what it does is it just gives you a probability argument. I am a classicist, and usually people misunderstand classicism to be a form of evidentialism, but it's really quite different. Like the presuppositionalist, I'm seeking for rational certainty. And what I'm trying to do is trying to make an analytical argument for the existence of God that is not open to question. It's either true or it's false. And that's the difference between evidentialists and me. And I'm going to be arguing via causalitatis. In other words, I'm going to say it's a cosmological argument. I'm going to argue from the cosmos. But I am going to say that as long as you accept my two premises, which I have at the beginning, which I'll ask him here in just a moment, the by way of a modus ponens, it necessarily follows, and it's not something that's open to question. And so before we begin, I'd like to ask for two foundational epistemological presuppositions that you will grant me. And the presuppositionalists like to say, that's why I'm a presuppositionalist. If you want to go into that, we can go into that. It's not. It's classical foundationalism. But I want to say that will you grant me the law of non-contradiction or the laws of thought? And will you grant me the basic reliability of sense perception? Not perfect, but just enough to know that you, the inquirer, exist.
So I'll grant the laws of logic because I don't have a choice.
Okay.
In as much as we can trust our sense perception, this is all we have. I think that I'm willing to grant that so long as we both understand that you and I are both throwing out capital T truth. That when you're talking about absolute certainty of a thing, if you're relying on a sense perception that you can't justify outside of itself, then the only things that we can know are capital T true are things that we define as such. Right. So I define, if I want to talk about all bachelors are unmarried, well, that is capital T true because we have defined it to be so. It can't not be that way because that is by definition what it is. But what we have access to, our sense perceptions and what we can move forward in that, we've got to do the best with what we can. So as long as we can move away from, or at least agree that capital T truth is kind of limited to those things that are defined as such.
Okay, well, I would have a difference on that. So you would define yourself as a nominalist then, right?
Well, let's go ahead.
Are you
I don't necessarily follow everything everywhere, so I'd rather take it from the top.
Okay, so a nominalist is someone who basically says that, and you're like virtually everybody else, especially in the skeptical community today, your emphasis is on epistemology rather than on metaphysics. And what you do is, I'm sorry?
Oh, go ahead. You're probably going to answer that.
Okay, let's go. Let me go ahead and say, because a nominalist believes that there's no such thing as universal that defines the things that instantiate within us. For example, this is what Socrates was going around asking everybody the question, like he would say, what is justice? And somebody might give him an example and say, well, when a judge does something that is correct within a given circumstance, and that is justice. And he would say, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an example of justice. I want to know what justice is. And what are you referring to? What's the referent that you have named this name justice to? And a nominalist would say, well, everything just there's no such thing as a universal that gives instantiation to something as justice, but it's just something that we experience, and it doesn't get any meaning until we name it. It's a nominalism, as you're giving a name to something, so it doesn't really have any meaning until you name it. And that's essentially what you've just expressed to me.
Well, mostly, so long as we can both agree that things can be described. Right. So when you're talking about meaning, we're specifically talking about intent and purpose. But if I were to put a chair in front of you that you've never seen and asked you to describe it, you would be able to describe that chair the same way that somebody who had seen a chair before would be able to describe it. Right.
Right.
Okay.
But when I'm giving those descriptions, when I say that it's brown, that it has a high backer on it, I think, when I am giving words to those descriptions, those are called accidental properties. Generally, they're going to be properties that has, or it could be substantial properties. Substantial properties, it must be what it is. Without it, it wouldn't be what it is. But for example, like a chair, the brownness is not necessarily correspond to the chairness. So it could be brown or it could be blue. When I'm talking about brownness and I'm naming it, am I naming something, or do I create brownness when I name it? That's the question. This is a problem that the nominalist needs to deal with. In other words, are you naming nothing? Well, when I'm naming, let's say, for example, blueness, am I naming something, or is it nothing until I say the name?
You're describing a very specific subset of the visible spectrum that we see, that we agree on. And when we agree on that, we can measure it. Yeah, that's an actual thing that we're describing. Where's the problem?
So it's objectively true that the concept of blueness exists, and it instantiates in that chair at that moment. As we see, it's not really the blue in the chair, but it's the light reflecting off of the chair. It's a secondary property. But that blueness that we're describing is something that actually exists, and I'm just describing. It's a predicate of the chair. The chair is blue. The subject is the chair. Blueness is the predicate. Now that predicate itself, in a sense, is greater than the subject of the chair, because if that blueness is not there, if I paint the chair brown, the blueness doesn't cease to exist by my doing that. So I've got.
How are you not? You just completely switched topics there. You're describing a concept and mixing it up with the existence of a thing. Basically, if I were to take that argument and reverse it and pull out a gun and say, "Take me to the number one," could you do it? No. Does that mean that one doesn't exist? Well, not in some world of forms that, you know, is tangible that we could get to, but it's an idea. Ideas exist.
Yes, but is that idea conventional to Eric? In other words, the concept one, does the number one as an abstract concept that you use in a mathematical formula, is it something that you made up when you were born? You yourself?
No. Well,
it exists.
Something I learned.
Yes, that's right. And something that you correspond to. Would that be fair to say that? When you name number one, you could call it Sally Struthers, okay? It doesn't really matter. We could agree, all of us could agree that Sally Struthers is number one. Okay.
I'm sure she would appreciate that.
Okay, just something that came to my mind. But so we could agree on that. The name is not really the important thing. It's the referent that we are referring to. And that's what I'm saying is something that must exist outside of us. And a nominalist has to come up with that conundrum. How do you, the greatest question of Western philosophy has always been unity and diversity. How do you explain the unified nature of all diversity? And that's the greatest question that we are answering as we look at these things.
That sounds like a deepity. Help me here.
Well, it kind of is, but that's I want to preface that to say that everything we've got to explain is how do we explain all of the differentiated things working together in coherence, because we've got these things like blueness and.
So I'm with you there. I'm not with you where you just left. You just left at this idea that the descriptor one is something that exists outside of things that we count as one. Right.
Okay. And it's yes. And so it has to be.
Take me to your number one.
Well, I have to say that it is the concept, number one, that we experience it, and we just named it. Let's say Sally Struthers. Okay. Sure. We named it that. Did it cease to exist when I stopped naming it? In other words, again, this is the difference between metaphysics and epistemology.
No,
you're is defined by epistemology, or does the metaphysic exist and we correspond to what is objectively exists in this world in which we live?
So, okay. So you're obviously referring back to the correspondence view of truth.
Yes.
So I don't see where the problem is, though. Are you saying that I cannot have ideas and that I can't justify them coming or going?
Well, you can have ideas that are subjective to you, but
sure,
there is a reality
limited to my sense perception, right? We agreed there. Okay, so yes. Where are you going?
Yes, we are limited to our sense perception. Therefore, we cannot have certainty about anything. Okay, but my problem is, though, if you're saying that the number one is something that each and every person makes up for themselves just because it's a whimsical thing that they have, there's a problem there, because you've got to answer for the unified nature of mathematical abstractions that we all experience. It's not something that we make up. Now, we may give it different names, but it's
answer for it?
You have to tell me what did you create it?
No, it's a concept that we created to describe and understand and enumerate things. How is that?
Is the thing that we're enumerating.
Maybe you can help me. How do you account for numbers?
Well, numbers are basically symbolic logic, and logic are functions of mind, and numbers are unchanging.
Logic, hold on. You're saying logic is a function of the mind?
Yes, right. And numbers are unchanging, and their formulas are unchanging. Therefore, they must be the product of an unchanging mind.
What? Hold on. Let's start at the beginning there, right? You said that logic is necessarily linked to a mind, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you have the laws of logic without minds?
No, because they are abstract concepts, right? Would you agree with that?
So in as much as a thing is what it is, isn't what it isn't, and can't be what it is and what it isn't at the same time, whether or not you're there to see it, understand it, or conceive of it, that thing still is what it is, isn't what it isn't, and can't be what it is and what it isn't at the same time. So I don't think you can escape the laws of logic just by saying that it has to exist within a mind. No, I don't grant that at all. I think that first premise is fundamentally flawed. Because
okay,
you're saying we have to understand it for it to exist, but what you're doing is you're conflating the map and the place, right? The map is the thing that we're writing out, where we're describing it. Where I can when I was talking to Eli last week, I said, hey, can I take you to the Shire, right, in the Lord of the Rings? No, but I can draw you a map. Right? We can describe these things, and those are the tools that we're using. That does not mean that those tools correspond to a physical thing, and it's the same the other way around. I don't see how you get that logic has to exist within a mind.
Do you agree that numbers are symbolic logic?
I agree that numbers are tools that we created to understand the universe.
Okay, so the numbers do not exist until you name it as Eric Murphy.
No, that is not
okay,
true.
So they exist. You just put a name on it, and we agreed on what the name would be, but the referent is unchanging. It's outside of us. Would you agree with that?
So one existed without me before I was born because we were using the number one before me. So
okay, but before man named it, did the concept of oneness in an abstract sense exist?
That's a nonsense idea. I throw out the entire thing. Does the concept of oneness exist? There has to be someone to conceive it. At the same time, could there be a singular thing without a person to conceive it? Yes. I'm not communicating this well. Let me try that again.
Okay.
So there is a rock in space, and we're talking about a solitary rock in space, right? We can agree as thinking beings that the rock is solitary. It's just one. No?
Yeah, you can say it's not, but the rock doesn't really work because the rock is contingent. A rock changes. It's not the same as a number.
So hear me out here. Maybe we can get there, right? We both agree that this rock is out there, and ta-da, right? It has qualities, yes. Do those qualities exist without us? Yes. Does our language and our understanding of it exist without us? No. Because our language and our understanding of it is tied to us. And so the characteristics, the blueness, right? Our understanding of blue goes away when we're not there to understand it. But does that change the fact that there's a wavelength in that spectrum that exists? Of course not. It's just you're mixing maps and places, right? You're mixing the descriptor and the thing that it's describing.
No, actually, that's what you're doing, my friend.
Go ahead, help me here.
Because I'm talking about, I'm not talking about wave, light waves. I'm talking about abstract concepts that are of a different level, because waves are something that, again, are contingent, they're changing. But abstract numbers and the concepts that they represent are utterly unchanging. They're utterly undependent on us. Now, you could say they're dependent upon us in that, but we name them and give them meaning. But that's something due to our weakness in understanding them, that we have to agree on these things. But the referent of the number is absolutely outside of us, and it exists apart from our contingency. And if you're going to say it's dependent on our conceptualizing of it, then you have to say it goes out of existence when Eric Murphy goes in, and somebody else has to come out and just make it up somehow exactly the same who comes after you, and that's ridiculous. It exists outside of us.
Hold on. So you're saying that if everybody who knows the word blue stopped existing, and then another person popped into existence, not knowing the word blue, and called it Jadlow. Does that mean that blue has died Is that what you're saying?
That's my
Blue
point.
can't exist?
You're conceding that it can't change. That the name can change, but the referent cannot. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we can change definitions. The thing that we're talking about is still there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you put a couple qualifiers out there. You said contingent.
Dependent. It's changing.
Right.
Okay.
So I understand that in math you can map out a wave function, and so long as you understand the variables, you can plug those in, and those are just as solid as the numbers themselves. I disagree with you there. It's just the application of said numbers. They're the same thing. And we can come to capital T truth in as much as we are defining things into existence and how they work. To say that a mind has to conceive, it sounds like you're saying that numbers are not contingent on us, but are contingent on another thing. Is that right?
No, they're not contingent at all.
Okay, cool.
They're necessary. They're ontologically necessary, I would say.
So why are we talking about numbers then?
Because we're talking about the need for
a mind to conceive.
We were comparing nominalism with realism. My perspective is realism, that there is a reality outside of us that I am not creating. I am giving it definition in a sense, and I'm giving it some life in a sense, in order that I'm giving a language to describe it. But it exists outside of me, and I am not creating. This is the difference between emphasizing epistemology over metaphysics. I'm going to be focusing on metaphysics, that reality that is outside of us, that is the foundation for reality, rather than my naming. This is why this is a problem I have with this. The reason we have men with penises today is because of nominalism. We think that we can make reality by simply stating it so. And I'm saying you can't do that. Something is what it is, whether you say so or not. And we cannot give meaning to objective reality. Objective reality is objective. Now, we can change names with it, or we can pretend we're doing that, but we're not actually making reality.
You know that if we're all pretending the same thing, then you've done that. You have changed that definition. I understand that. Sorry, the penises example is probably one that's going to lead us down a rabbit hole that you're not going to want to go down. So let's find.
Just forget that.
Let's find a different avenue. So if we're talking about, I'm trying to bring us back to this. You said that everything needs to exist within God's mind, right? That God has to conceive of it for it to exist. Is that where you're going?
Well, yeah, and that's using analogical language there. Of course, God doesn't conceive of things in such a way that he moves from one point to another.
Can you tell me anything about the God you're talking about? Can you give me any descriptors of it?
Yes, he is subsistence existence.
So if you can give me descriptors of this thing, then you surely can prove that it exists before giving it descriptors, unless we're talking about a fiction, right? We can talk about Zeus, but you're probably not going to agree that Zeus exists the same way your God exists, correct?
Right. Okay. That's right. Well, why don't I go ahead and go into the argument then now? So we'll say that if something exists, there are only four possibilities. And number one, it is an illusion, and it is not real at all. It's just a mere illusion that we have. Number two, it is self-created. Number three, it is self-existent. Or number four, it is created by something that is self-existent. And let me go through those real quickly and demonstrate the problems with them. If you want to say everything is an illusion, this is why I asked for basic reliability of sense perception, such that you could at least know that you exist. I don't need to know that you exist, Eric.
Hold on, question.
Sure.
So you're stacking this up in a way that it feels like you're going to say that it has to be one of these four?
Right.
And then cut down each, leaving one, saying that necessarily must be the only thing, and that is what it is. Is that the argument you're about to make?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a possibility that there's another option that you haven't thought of or somebody else hasn't thought of?
Sure, but I've never heard it.
Okay, so then
I've been doing this about 10 years and not found anybody yet that can. They tried.
We've been doing it for thousands, and that doesn't.
That's exactly right.
So I'm wholly that's entirely unremarkable that we haven't come across an idea yet. But the question is, that is going to be going through my mind as you go through this is, how are you justified in making that assertion that it has to be X if the other way of saying it is I don't know, right? I'm going to be weighing it against I don't know. And so I'm going to be looking at it and going, okay, why is Trey saying this instead of I don't know? Is it because he can't think of anything else? Because that's the argument from incredulity, right? Is it because it props up something else that maybe he hasn't brought into justification? Well, then we should probably talk about that other thing that's being propped up. But so go ahead. I just want you to know this is where I'm approaching it.
Eric, would it be fair to say though that if I make an assertion and you disagree, the burden is yours to demonstrate the fallacious nature of my argument? Or if you say there's another way, you can't just say I don't know. You have to either say there's a problem with your way, and then you have to say, and there could be another way. You have to give a justification for that. You can't just say I don't know, because I don't know is a concession. If I have an answer and you just say, well, I don't agree, but I don't know, that is a concession of the argument.
Wow. I don't think I've ever disagreed so violently with someone before.
Really?
My goodness. That is vile. Yeah. It's a vile idea. You seem like a great dude, but that is a vile idea. And I want to stamp that out in oh my gosh. Okay. So you've heard the gumball analogy, right?
I think so, but I don't remember it.
Sure, no worries. Well, I'll just give it to you. I have a roommate here. His name is Thomas. He has another YouTube channel, Holy Kool-Aid. Let's say that you and I are sitting in a room and Thomas brings us a jar of gumballs. You've never seen it. I've never seen it, right? And he sets the jar of gumballs on the counter and says, Trey, Eric, I want you to tell me, is the number of gumballs in this jar even or odd? And I take one look at it and I say, it's an odd number. I know this for a fact. Do you agree with me?
No, because you're making an empirical argument.
Okay, so are you saying that it's even? Because it sounds like you're saying it has to be even, right?
It has to be even or odd.
No. You're disagreeing with me, and I said that it's odd, which means you're making the claim that it's even, correct?
Eric, you're not getting the point.
No,
you're giving me an empirical argument. I'm not making an empirical argument. I'm making an analytical argument.
So let's follow this through.
Okay.
I'm saying that it's odd. You're disagreeing with me. Are you making the argument that it's even? Why did you disagree with me when I looked at the jar and said it's odd? Could I be right?
You could be right. Mm-hmm. And you know that you could be right, but you know that your senses could fail you, right?
So is your argument against my justification of saying that it's an odd number hard solipsism?
No, I'm fine with hard solipsism. I don't need anything except for the inquirer. You, the inquirer, is all I need for my
cool. So then I, as a person, am saying it's an odd number. Do you agree with me or not?
You have statistically speaking, a 50% chance.
I'm asking you if you agree with me or not.
No, because it's an empirical statement. I can't.
So you're saying it's even.
I'm saying it's either even or odd.
So.
Are you saying it could be something else?
I'm saying that the correct answer is I don't know. And that doesn't mean...
It's either even or odd, 100%.
Do you think I don't know doesn't... It means you need to withhold until more evidence comes about that is
on an analytical argument. You're using an empirical argument. I'm not making an empirical argument. I'm making an analytical argument.
Okay, so you're saying that I don't know does not exist in your arguments.
I don't know. If you cannot refute my argument and you say, I don't know, then you are wrong. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I I disagree, because I think that I don't know should be a valid response when you don't know. And that doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means that you don't know. And
okay, but if
I think it's no, it's okay. I think it is one of the most intellectually honest things a person can do when they say, I don't know, because we live in a society that says, hey, you have ceded the argument. If you say that I don't know, you lose. That's not true.
Okay.
You may be the only honest person in the room.
Okay, if I say 2 + 2 = 4, and you say, no, I disagree, and I say, well, what would be your perspective? You say, I don't know. Would that be a good answer?
Well, let's see if there's evidence for it. I think there is a pretty good amount of evidence that 2 + 2 = 4.
I would say you need to demonstrate me to be wrong. You would have to demonstrate me to be wrong. Don't just say I don't know. That's a concession.
No.
Do you see the difference?
No, it's
because that's an analytical argument about 2 + 2 = 4. You disagree. You could not rebut it, and you said I don't know. And I say, thank you. I'll take my victory lap right now.
Okay, and I think that in doing so, you've said you know for a fact it's an even number, and congratulations.
No, I said it's even or odd. That's an empirical argument, not an analytical argument.
I asked you, I didn't know you're changing the question. The question in this analogy is it even or odd? I said odd. Do you agree with
your senses could trick you. It's either one or the other, though.
Okay, so hard solipsism. Testing, 1, 2. Are you there, Trey? We seem to be experiencing technical difficulties. Trey is going to hop out and hop back in, and we'll see if we can get him right back. In the meantime, I get to read a little bit in the comments. Oh, there you are.
Am I back?
You're back, and I can hear you.
Okay. I just popped out and came back in, so I don't know what happened there.
I don't know, but I'm glad that you did that. Fantastic. Okay. So, do you agree with me, yes or no?
50% possible.
I didn't ask you what the possibility is. I asked you if you agree with me, yes or no.
I cannot be certain about that, so why would I say I can be certain? That would be lying.
I agree.
Okay.
The
empirical
empirical
data cannot be certainty, but logical, analytical arguments can give certainty. That's why my class is certainty.
If we're talking about deductive arguments.
That's right.
Okay, and deductive arguments can lead to truth because we've defined it as such.
Well, because deductive arguments are true by definition.
Right.
But you have to grant, like, say you say all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Right.
You have some assumptions in there, because how do you know that all men are mortal? How do you know that you're not the person who's going to live forever? And the only way you know is posthumously. So that's kind of difficult.
So where I would go with that is I would say that in the definition that we've used, we would need to then reassess that and then plug in what we learn after the fact.
Right.
But to say all men
but
are
if
mortal,
you grant that all men are mortal and that Socrates is a man, it necessarily follows
that Socrates is immortal. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the kind of certainty that I'm searching for. And again, the only way I can have certainty is if I'm granted, though, law of non-contradiction and basic sense perception enough to know that I, as a solipsist, if you will, exist. Because I don't even need you to exist. I don't need this computer to exist. All I need is myself as I'm thinking about things. And that's the first point. Okay, so the first point is that everything's an illusion. We know that everything's not illusion by way of Descartes' cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. If I am not existing, then who is asking the question? Obviously, somebody's here questioning the question. So obviously, I myself, the inquirer, exist. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so the second possibility is that which exists is self-created. And we know that that's not possible because you've already granted the law of non-contradiction. In order for something to create itself, it would need to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. It would need to create itself before it was, which is manifest nonsense.
Okay. I think you've defined your God out of existence by doing so. But I'd love to see how that is not the case.
Okay. The third option is that which exists is self-existent. And that which is self-existent cannot be subject to change. It must be self-existent. In order, am I out?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. If something changes, it is by definition subject to whatever it is that affects the change, because that which causes gives being to things. So when something changes, say for example, I go out in the sun and my skin becomes more tan, I have been affected by the sun. Therefore, that affectation that I have demonstrates that I'm contingent. I'm not self-existent. If something is self-existent, it cannot be acted upon by something other than itself. Because if it did, then it would show that it is dependent upon that which acted the change. So since the universe changes, or we'll just say you as the inquirer, you know that you change, okay? So let's just say you're the only one existing, you are changing.
It sounds like you're backing the argument from contingency into this.
What do you mean?
So the premises of the argument from contingency are what you are given, like, so basically, I feel like that falls apart a little bit. You've summed this one up as not being able to exist because of the argument from contingency. And so, okay, that's fine. What's your last one?
Okay, so the last one is that which exists is created by something that is self-existent.
Okay.
You cannot have, and this is going to be via modus ponens, if a conditional statement, if P then Q, if P is granted, then Q necessarily follows.
Sure.
And I myself am I'm a, what do you call it? I'm an effect, and you cannot have an effect creating itself before it exists. Therefore, there must be a cause, and that cause itself must be unchanging and self-existent.
I don't grant that.
Okay.
Because you've given yourself special permission. How did you all of a sudden say that it's okay when in the second example you gave, you showed that it's nonsense? That's nonsense.
No. To create itself would mean to an effect making itself without a cause.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Right.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad you agree. I'm glad we both agree it's nonsense.
Yeah. So because that's not what I'm asserting. I'm asserting that every effect must have a cause. Would you agree with that? That's an analytical statement. Every effect must have a cause. This is where Bertrand Russell didn't understand this his entire life. It's amazing a man so brilliant as him could make such a foolish mistake.
I think somebody being a fool is just fine, so long as they offer up some benefit to humanity.
And he didn't. That's the problem.
Sorry. That just one of the things that my pastor did when I tried to talk to him as an atheist is his first response to me was, yeah, well, Stephen Hawking said something stupid and everybody laughed at him. Therefore, so you can't show, because everybody laughed at him because he was wrong.
Oh, I'm not appealing to laughter. I'm appealing to the invalid nature of his argument. He said that he got it from John Stuart Mill. He used to believe in God, and then when he was like 17, he read John Stuart Mill, and basically John Stuart Mill said, if everything needs a cause, then what caused God?
Right. Yeah, the turtles the whole way down.
But that's not the principle. That's not what the principle of causality even states. It doesn't say everything needs a cause. It says every effect must have a cause, and it's analytically true.
So, I don't understand how you're getting to a thing that can create itself.
I didn't assert a thing can create itself. That's impossible.
Can a thing create itself?
No. That's absolute nonsense.
Okay. So then have we thrown out your last example?
No, because it was created by something that is self-existent. Self-existence does not have any potentiality. It's pure subsistent existence itself. That's the whole point.
So self-existence.
It's a cause.
Can you give me an example of a self-existent thing?
Yeah, the very thing that you're depending upon to say, can you give me an example of something that's self-existent? You wouldn't exist, Eric.
Very snarky, but I want you to give me an example of a thing that is self-existent.
That's not snarky. That's an analytical argument. You could not exist independently because you are dependent by definition. Would you agree with that?
I'm not arguing with you on that. I agree that when my mom and my dad met, they fell in love, and well. We're going to get a little.
They conceived you,
but
they conceived you.
Yeah. So, I obviously understand that. I asked you to give me an example of something that is self-existent.
That which upholds all contingency, for which it could not exist. It's God.
So you just defined a God as necessarily having to exist because you say so.
Analytically. No, not because
No,
I say so.
no. Hold on. You don't get to say analytically when you define something into existence without justification. You're saying that this has to be because it has to be. That's essentially creating a circular argument wherein you're saying if God, therefore God, because God. It makes zero sense. I'm sorry, but you point at a self-existent thing.
Eric, you granted modus ponens. Did you not? Just a few minutes ago.
Help me here, Trey.
Okay. If P, then Q in a conditional statement.
Right.
If an effect exists, you, the inquirer, exists, then you must have a cause. And you cannot have an infinite regress of dependent existence existing independently because it's dependent by definition.
How do you know that?
You already granted me the law of identity, did you not?
Okay, so then if we're going to follow that, then that God had a God, and that God had a God, and turtles the whole way down, infinite regress.
Right.
You don't.
An infinite regress of dependent existence existing independently, but it's not independent; it's dependent by definition. Do you understand that?
So again, let's go back. You're talking about a God that has to exist because it has to exist, because there has to be a beginning, otherwise it's nonsense.
No, there doesn't have to be a beginning. There has to be a self-existent being. Okay. Contingent being doesn't have to be by definition.
Right.
That's what we are. So, we don't have to be. We're not necessary.
So can we agree on the existence of any self-existent thing?
Yes.
But good.
And we can disagree on his nature, but you have conceded the argument and this is the thing, everybody used to argue with me about this. It's funny because all my atheist friends, now I've been doing this, like I said, about 10 years. All my atheist friends, I used to hang out in the Google Plus community stuff. But most of my friends now are actually coming to the point where they are finally conceding a necessary being. They just don't like my necessary being because they realize it's an inescapable. Now, Eric, not only have I never lost an argument, I've never had a serious challenge to this argument.
Well, that is incredibly... wow. Okay.
A bold statement.
Yeah, it is. It definitely tells me that you don't take the other person like you can change my mind. Can I change yours, Trey?
Absolutely. I could be wrong about everything that I have, everything that I know.
I could.
I'm not a precept.
Right. So, it feels like you're shoehorning that in. No, I know that in the chat they're saying, Eric, just grant it so you can have him apply that to his God. And I get that. But I do want to, before we get there, I do just want to point out that saying that there has to be a beginning to it to prevent an infinite regress. How?
I'm not positing a beginning to self-existent being. It has to be time, because time. Would you agree that time? Do you know what time is?
I understand time.
Okay, how would you define it?
Well, time is something that we experience. We experience things happening in succession and have delineated that in such a way that we're able to consistently understand it. Why?
Would you?
We also can study time as far as relative things are concerned, right? We can take a look at atomic clocks and how they fall out of sync if we're
So when we make our time, when we set time, we are measuring motion of matter as it relates to each other. We used to have planetary clocks, and we would, then we moved to the atomic clock because it's more consistent with the measure the, I don't know if it's the electrons around a cesium atom or something like that, and it's going to give us more consistent. Mm-hmm. But time is just the measurement of change. Would you grant that? I see this all now.
Not simply, but that's because I have kind of an understanding of time that envelops more than just change, right? Something can exist through time and not change. It's just what it is,
Okay, but would you agree that our understanding of time, though, the only way that we can understand it is we're just basically measuring change, relationship of moving bodies to each other?
I'll grant it. Go ahead.
Okay, so you cannot have an infinite regress of contingent being because it had to happen by definition, because it moves, it depended. If it were not for that on which contingent being exists, it would not be. Okay.
Okay. Let's break that.
So the effect causes give being to things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, my coffee on my mug, say sitting on my desk.
I understand that. But I'm saying that you live in a universe where you can't point to a single thing that's uncaused. The only thing that you can point to that's uncaused is what you're defining into existence that you have not justified or shown can exist.
And well, yes, I did analytically, and you even granted it by granting modus ponens. You cannot have dependent being existing independently, by definition, because it's dependent.
So isn't the correct answer, I don't know?
Well, yes, you just conceded the argument because I gave you an analytical argument. I said there must be a self-existent being on which all dependent being exists, and you said, I don't know. I'd say, well, that's not a rebuttal, that's a concession.
Yeah, and I would, again, say that is violently wrong, just because you don't know either. And
I just told you I do know.
Yes, and
by analysis, by logic, I made a logical argument.
Okay.
And you granted modus ponens. You just don't like it.
No, if P therefore Q does not mean that there's necessarily a non-contingent thing.
Well, you grant that there's dependent existence, right?
You let me say that again, because I think you won something, and all you did is make a big circle, and that's not winning. That's just patting yourself on the back. Let's try that again. Okay. Point at a non-contingent thing. Tell me about a non-contingent thing that we agree on.
That which you depend on and your dependency in order to exist.
Cool. My parents are non-contingent. Is that what you're saying?
Your parents. Did they change?
Yes, absolutely. They changed. So are my grandparents non-contingent?
Is this entire universe that you know that you are positing, is it under this umbrella of dependent?
I don't know.
It changes. Which changes is dependent by definition.
Hold on. Have you investigated the entire universe? Are you justified in making that claim?
No, I'm the one actually is making a different claim.
Oh, so you're not making the claim that the universe is contingent.
Well, it depends on how you want to define the universe. You want to define the universe as everything that is created, that's a universe, or do you want to say everything that is? Because you got to have two different ontologies. You got to have self-existence or necessary being and contingent being.
No, you don't. You have contingent, and then you can bring the other one in when you can justify it. No,
okay, so so dependent existence can exist independently, you're saying?
I'm saying I don't know. When you get back to the beginning, if you want to trace the line of causality back, to make any claims is folly. Because unless you've investigated such, what you're doing is giving a special permission to a thing that has no qualities that you've ever seen demonstrated before, because it makes you comfortable.
Well, no, that's exactly
because it fits that narrative, that the idea that there's a non-contingent thing feels good. I understand that. I wish that you could show me that in a way that, hey, Eric, here's another non-contingent thing. That way I can go, okay, I can grant that. But it's what is it? It's the special pleading. There we go, special pleading fallacy. Because you get to break your own rule in this one case.
I didn't break any rules. You're the one that said I don't know and I can't answer.
That doesn't make you right, Trey.
Well, it does, because I know.
Then I was right about the gumballs being odd.
No, that's an empirical.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about this actual universe that we're living in?
Indeed,
are we talking about an actual? Okay, cool. So then, how is that different? The gumballs exist in the same universe that you're discussing. You're talking about. So how are those different?
Because you're using induction to make an argument about something. I'm not making an inductive argument. I'm making a deductive argument.
Yeah, I didn't make an inductive argument. I gave you a deductive example. Odd and even are the two possibilities of the gumballs, correct?
Right.
Okay. And have we investigated said gumballs? No, that doesn't mean that the option is not even and not odd, it means that we don't have the justification to make the assertion that it's even or odd. You say, I don't know, because you give yourself...
It is even or odd, though. You agree with that, right?
Sure.
It's only one of those two choices.
I agree. That's not the question, though. The question is, are you saying that it's odd because I said that it's even? No.
No, because you don't know.
Right, and neither do you.
I made an analytical argument. You granted it, an modus ponens argument.
Okay, so hold on. If P, therefore Q, right? Let's try that again. Okay.
The P is creation, effect, you.
Okay, and the P is the thing that caused it.
No, if P, then it necessarily implies Q. You can't have an effect creating itself.
I didn't, so hold on. My parents would be the P in my existence.
No, your parents are contingent. We're talking about categories, not entities.
In my existence, in the same way that we're talking about Socrates being immortal, P and Q is not specifically lined out just for that argument. You use logic in other places, right? So
yes.
That example is one wherein P is also contingent. You're following it back and then giving yourself an out.
No, I'm not talking about P and Q both being contingents. I'm saying one is contingent. The other is a necessary cause, which is necessary.
No. P, give me a P that's not contingent.
It doesn't exist. That's what, by definition,
I agree, it doesn't exist.
We've defined P by being contingent. And you've also granted that P cannot create itself before it exists.
And I don't see why you haven't talked yourself out of this argument.
Because I'm thinking.
That's good. I want you to. I want you to say, I don't know, because you give yourself permission to think. But
I will grant you, Eric, that's the best answer I've gotten. And I've never gotten a rebuttal, but the best answer I've gotten is, I don't know. And it's essentially, I don't like the answer, so I'm just going to... It's funny how you guys love certainty. All my atheist friends, they love certainty until it comes to one atheist.
Oh, okay.
You guys love inquiry until it comes to this one subject, and all of a sudden you praise ignorance. Oh, how glorious it is to be open-minded and say, I don't know. I mean, it's a very, very popular answer that I get.
Sure. Well, I think that I don't know is not praising ignorance. It's honest. Don't you value honesty?
You were saying it was beautiful earlier.
Yeah, don't you value honesty?
No, you're doing it dishonestly, though. You're not rebutting the argument.
Don't you value honesty, Trey? Because if the honest thing to do is to say, I don't know, then either you're going to value that or you're not. Because right now, you're saying it's better that I pull something out of my butt than say I don't know, because then I would have lost the argument. You're creating a hostile place for discussion. That doesn't get us anywhere. No. It's creating a hostile environment for discussion, right? To say
by using logic.
Oh, you're so. Hold on a second. You don't get to say by using logic. I don't know is not valuable. No, Trey. You can't. Okay. Can you? You don't think I'm being hostile to you, though, do you? So if you're creating an environment where I don't know is losing, I think that is a hostile thing.
It's hostile for you to lose.
No, it's hostile to exclude not knowing.
Oh, okay.
Do you understand that?
Well, right? No, because you're not rebutting the argument, though. You're just saying, I don't know.
You're correct. You could be right. The number of gumballs in the jar could be even.
That's not what we're discussing, my friend.
It's
not an empirical argument. It's a deductive argument.
If we're talking about this universe that we share together, then we have to agree that a thing is what it is, isn't what it isn't, and can't be what it is and what it isn't at the same time. And if you're saying that your argument is so necessarily fundamentally different from a jar of gumballs,
the jar of gumballs it's your experience. You're guessing. How do you know perfectly how many gumballs are in the jar?
Exactly. I'm glad we got there together. I agree with you, Trey.
Then you agree it's an empirical argument.
I agree with you that making the claim that a non-contingent being has to exist, or a non-contingent thing, is saying a thing that you can't possibly know.
Uh,
But I do want to at least have a couple more minutes, and because I know you have to leave soon.
mhm.
Let's say I granted it. How do you know it's not Allah?
Allah is a monad, and you cannot have, if God is unipersonal, then he would depend on creation in order to be relational, and therefore he would be deficient and he would be contingent by definition. He must be relational as he is, so Allah does not work.
So you're saying that relational is a quality. Can you help me understand what relational is?
Are we relating to each other?
Sure.
Would it be fair to say that you call that quality relationality?
I'm willing to accept that. Okay.
Okay. So Allah, how can he be relational and love be real when he depends on creation in order to love?
So you're saying that the Muslim God depends on love to exist.
No, he depends on creation in order to love.
Okay.
And love, therefore, is not a part of who he is. Therefore, he cannot be loving.
Okay. So how do you give your God that out? I mean, you're assigning qualities to a thing that you can't even show has thoughts. Because even if I granted you the premise that we've been arguing about, what's your justification for that being a thinking being?
Because we see thought and purpose, teleology, instantiating in this conversation right now.
Are you giving me the argument from look at the trees?
No, I'm giving you the argument for you wanting to interact with me. You cannot have, is that a purpose? Is that a goal for you to interact with me and to learn maybe, or to share an idea?
So I'm surprised. So you're saying that you see intentionality in this universe, and that points back to a thinking God.
You can't have intention unintentionally.
I agree. So how did you get to the idea that there's intention?
Because you just intended to say that. All I need is one instance of intention, and there must be an eternal intentioner, because intention cannot. So intentionality can be created by unintentionality.
No, it means that we're describing things. If that was the case, then I can say I made a spicy burrito for dinner. Is it spicy? We can both take a bite out of it and go, that is a spicy thing. Therefore, there must be an ultimately spicy thing. Otherwise, spice doesn't exist. And I call that spice God.
Well, the concept of spiciness, that's what we were discussing with realism and nominalism. You're not naming nothing when you describe spiciness. Okay?
Did I summarize your argument there? In my spicy argument? Is God ultimately spicy?
The concept of spicy must be, if you will, an idea in the mind of God.
Okay. What about evil? Evil? If can something be more or less evil?
Yes, it can, but evil is not a positive quality; it's a privation.
No, hold on a second. It's a quality. It is a quality.
A quality of privation, yes.
Okay, so that means that there are graduating scales of privation.
Yes.
Which means that there has to be something that is an ultimately deprived thing, and I call that thing God.
No, because to be deprived is to be missing the mark of its perfection. Okay.
So it only works when it's a good quality?
No, evil is a privation of the good. So, for example, you'd say blindness is an evil. Why would you say that?
I wouldn't say blindness is an evil.
Oh, so you would be glad to be blind?
Why? How did you get there?
Well, I'm saying evil
genocide is evil.
I'm saying genocide is a privation of life, right?
Right.
Okay, and that is evil. Because people were made to live.
How did you get there? People are made because their parents had sex.
Yes, but you're saying they're good, right?
The people are good?
Yeah.
Well, I hope so. But I don't know how we're getting to a deductive argument there.
I'm sorry?
I don't know how we're getting to a deductive argument there. I'm saying I hope that people are good.
I'm essentially talking
for the most part.
Discussing Thomas's fourth and fifth way, that you see degrees of something, and there must be a perfection of it. And you're also seeing purpose. You think that it's. I didn't even address this before, but you were saying that we need to have the world that's good, and you're assuming the sanctity of the human existence, the human condition, in order to come up with your moral code that you want to impose.
And there's a presuppositional argument if I've ever seen one.
But I'm using your example. You're the one who presupposed it, not me. And you need to give a justification for it.
Okay. Can you state that in a way that I can either agree with or disagree with? That way I can...
Okay. Would it be fair to say that your moral code is based upon the sanctity of existence? In other words, that existence matters. Of humans. Let's just play it on humans for now. Human existence is good.
Yeah. Existence is preferable to non-existence. To me. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So life matters.
Sure, because we want it to matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So we want it to matter. Where did that determination come? Are we determined to want to have existence good, or to exist?
I don't understand the question. Could you say it a different way?
Are you determined to value existence?
Am I determined to value existence?
Yes. You're programmed that way.
I mean,
if somebody doesn't, do you think that they're broken, like an axe murderer?
Well, we're talking about, sociopathy. We're talking about inability to experience empathy, right? And empathy is something that we're hard-coded to experience.
Right. So we're determined.
Not doing that is, we also see that throughout the animal kingdom, and we understand that is a trait that social beings and social species have. So, okay, I'm following you so far.
Okay, so it's a privation to when somebody does not value existence. But then you want to say as an atheist that existence doesn't matter. It's not valuable.
Could you, let's say you have a dog that is suffering. It's old. It has arthritis in all of its joints. It's blind. It's in pain. Right. Would it be moral to put that dog down?
Yes, it would, because the number one, the dog is not made in the image of God, and number two, there's no salvation for that dog. In other words, you're putting it out of its misery.
Hold on. So if you get to bring in outside stuff, then I get to bring in outside stuff, right? Like made in the image of God, I don't grant.
Yes, but you
has a soul that has salvation, I don't grant. So far you're giving me no valuable arguments that dog should be put down, other than you want it to because you understand that is the kind thing to do.
Okay, listen, we will have to carry this on, my dear friend.
We will, because you gotta get going.
Yeah.
Trey, this has been really fun.
I very much enjoyed talking to you. I did too.
I hope that people can look back through this. I know that it frustrated a couple people that we didn't get further, but I just started the channel, which means that they can just watch more and we can get there eventually. But in the meantime, I'm glad we got to explore it. Trey, is there anything that you want to plug before I let you go?
No, I'm just, I enjoy doing this. I'd love to talk to you again. Again, this is my favorite format, just having conversation. I think it's really good to go back and forth, and we can explore these things, and you can say, stop, no, wait, right there.
Yeah.
That's so thank you for your format, and I appreciate your charity too. You're a very kind person.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of interlocutor I like to have, where we can, even if we disagree, we can love each other and value each other. And so I appreciate your attitude and the way that you do this.
Well,
so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. I hope you have a good night, and we will talk again, because I want to get to the next part of this. To be continued.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
All right, man. Okay, we'll see you.
Right. Bye. That does not mean that we are done. Wow. So I think that this is actually a really, really good format to say, holy crap, you've got to read in the comments. Because there is an ongoing conversation. And does it get frustrating? Well, when you feel like you can see something that the other person just doesn't, I get it. And I think that he felt that way at some point. And I know that I felt that way. And I could see in the comments that there are plenty of other people that felt that way. It just means that we need to investigate. And should I be investigating? Always. And I think he should be too. I don't think he's justified in making some of those claims, but hopefully he will continue to evaluate. That said, we didn't yell at each other. We didn't cuss each other out. And we definitely didn't fall back on ad hom attacks. It can be done. That said, he and I wanted to talk to each other. That's important because there are plenty of people who've reached out and said, oh my gosh, Eric, how do I talk to my uncle who just doesn't want to talk to me? Well, if they don't want to talk to you, then they're not going to talk to you. The person that I just spoke to wouldn't have talked to me if they didn't want to. And we have to understand that. That said, I do want to go into a patron-only live chat. I want to be able to bring people up, put them up on video, talk, and have a good time. So if you are enjoying this, definitely consider going to Patreon. If not, I totally understand it, but share it out and let me know what you think. I want to know what I can add and what I can change, and maybe the format needs to be adjusted a little bit, or maybe I need to, add a lower third at the bottom. I can do live tweets that come up throughout the episode. I just finished a video intro. I don't know how well that worked. I don't know if it blew your ears out, but I enjoyed making it. I'd love to see what your feedback is. I also want to thank my patrons. I really want to do this. And it's because of the support that I can. So I want to thank Kathy, Levi, Girl with the Cane, Billy, Alana, Megan, Ellen, Ray, James, Kristen, Kitty, and David. Thank you. That said, I'm going to take this shirt off, turn on the fan, make myself a drink, and then hop over into the patron-only live stream. Take care, everybody, and do something good in your world. I'll see you next week.